Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar, Move with Your Cycle. So today we'll be discussing how to use movement as medicine and how to really understand your cycle, and how you could transform your relationship with exercise, your energy, and your mood. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Connie. Connie is the co-founder of NIXI Body, the period underwear brand designed to help women harness the power of movement and make their lives happier and healthier. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, just pop them in the question chat below or the Q&A box, and we'll try our best to answer them at the end. So Connie, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, lovely. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, as Imogen just said, I am Connie and I'm the co-founder of NIXI Body. So we are a leak-proof and period underwear brand. So we deal with periods and bladder leaks, and really we want to keep women moving through menstruation, motherhood, and menopause. So whatever is going on for you, we want you to have the confidence that you can move, play, jump, whatever it is that makes you feel good without worrying about leaks. We are loved by thousands of women who want to stay active, including some like well-known faces and bums in some cases on this slide. So people like Denise Lewis wear our knickers. Bryony Gordon, who you might have seen, she runs marathons in her pants. She has run marathons in her knicksies, which is cool. And loads of other women who, some are elite athletes like England netballers, some are, everyday women who just want to stay active. And if you are an Evelyn community member or follow Evelyn, you might recognize Alicia, who is Evelyn's ambassador, and she's just popped down here in her pants, and she loves them too. So yeah, we've got some really lovely fans. So a little bit about me. So Kelly, my co-founder, she started the business when she designed her first pair of knickers, should I say, when she was experiencing bladder leaks after early menopause. Kelly had a really long life of gynecological health issues, including endometriosis. She had really heavy, painful periods, and that's why she went through a hysterectomy, which caused her early menopause, which then caused her bladder leaks. So she's really been through the ringer, and through it, exercise was massive for her. And from my side, I met Kelly when she first designed her first pair of knickers. And at that point, I was on a bit of a journey to trying to get more hormonal balance in my life. And something that I recognized was, and I'll talk a little bit about this later on, is just the impact that traditional period care products can have on our health, as well as the environment. And so I was really looking for alternatives, met Kelly, fell in love with her, fell in love with the knickers. The rest is history. But my life, as women's life do, has moved on, and I'm a new mum, or maybe not so new now, but I had a baby a year ago. So I've been on a real journey with kind of like exercise as a sort of pre-baby, all through my pregnancy, then trying to get back to it after having a baby. And also I've really struggled with extreme PMS since having my baby. So anyone that has got PMDD will know how hard it is to get a diagnosis. I'm currently going back and forth to doctors at the moment, but certainly I've felt a massive hormonal shift since becoming a mum, and exercise has been something that constantly I come back to, just to try and lift those moods when they come. So I am talking a little bit today from personal experience as well as kind of my background in women's health. So exercise and PMDD, can it really help? I think, as we all know, research into anything to do with women's health is rubbish. So there aren't loads and loads of studies on this subject, but there are some out there. And anything you read tends to show that exercise is help rather than a hindrance when it comes to managing PMS symptoms and PMDD, if that's kind of the extremity that it's getting to. This is just one study that I wanted to flag where participants noticed a 60% reduction in overall PMS symptoms. It was actually more for physical symptoms rather than the kind of emotional symptoms. But generally speaking, anything you look at will show exercise is good for our mental health, for our mood, and for our hormonal balance. So that's good news, although we would definitely love more research into this. I think it's really important to remember that PMS is usually impacted by how you treat your body throughout your whole cycle, not just on the days that you're feeling rubbish. Obviously, there are some things, and we'll talk about this later, that can offer short-term relief. But ultimately, we want to be looking at this as a sort of overall lifestyle piece that isn't a silver bullet. And equally, I think that's also important to recognize when it can be really frustrating if you're going to a doctor and saying, I'm in such a bad place, like I'm having really dark thoughts, I'm really, really struggling with my PMS. And they just say, oh, just go for a walk. It's like, okay, it's not as simple as that. But what we do know is the better we look after ourselves, generally speaking, the kind of less extreme we tend to see PMS symptoms. So that's not just your one cycle. I think I've read some research before that really your period and your PMS, that kind of experience that you have, is almost like a culmination of 3 months of how you've been seeing. And I saw that a lot when I was trying to get pregnant because I could see that if I'd had a really stressful month a couple of months back, then my periods would go haywire. So we really want to be looking at this as not just a short-term fix, actually, how can we look at our lifestyle in general? Now, I could do a whole talk on the menstrual cycle. And if you're part of the Evelyn community, I highly recommend downloading their guides because they go into much more detail about all of this. And they're incredible. But I thought it would be really helpful just before we kind of get into the hormones involved with exercise, if we all and kind of what's going on with our cycle, if we just took a bit of a crash course on our menstrual cycle hormones. So there's obviously loads of hormones going on in our body all the time. But if we focus on the key ones that we really, really talk about a lot when it comes to menstrual cycle, it's estrogen and it's progesterone. So when you have your first day of your period, that is day one of your cycle, and this pink line is showing kind of the estrogen. And your estrogen is going to be really low when your period starts. Now, almost as soon as you start bleeding, it should start to rise. And it keeps rising throughout our follicular phase. So that first half of our cycle. I like to think of estrogen as a bit of the Beyonce of hormones. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel confident. And so that's why people tend to have that kind of a much better feeling in that follicular phase. And I'll come on to what that means in terms of exercise in a minute. Our estrogen peaks as we ovulate, and almost as soon as we ovulate, as we release that egg, the estrogen levels are going to dip down. And that's when we enter our luteal phase. Now, in our luteal phase, estrogen is lower and we are progesterone dominant. So that's that blue line here. Now, if estrogen is Beyonce, let's think of progesterone as like a Billie Eilish-esque character. It's a bit more insular, it's a bit more anxious. It's really interesting why that happens. It's because in our second half of our cycle, our body doesn't really know if we are pregnant or not, because we could have got pregnant when we ovulated here. So basically, your body is putting you into protective mode. Like, it wants you to stay home, it wants you to be safe because it thinks you could be pregnant. So it's our body trying to do us a favor, but obviously when we're just trying to live our lives, it can be really frustrating that half the month we're not feeling our best. And especially if you have PMDD and you are super sensitive to these hormonal changes, you might notice that in that second half of your cycle, you're really struggling. And that's obviously what we want to talk a little bit about today. And while we're talking about hormones, let's talk about the hormones that are involved in exercise. So endorphins, you'll hear about this a lot. Serotonin, dopamine, these are all feel good, reward based, happy hormones. And the good news is that exercise increases all of these. That's shown time and time again in studies. So that's probably one of the really key reasons why exercise can help us when we're sort of dealing with PMS and PMDD, because when our estrogen levels are low, our serotonin levels are low. And again, if you've got PMDD, you're going to be even more sensitive to those changes. So when that second half of our cycle, when serotonin is low, we want to find healthy ways to boost that. And exercise is a great one. There are also unhealthy ways to boost things like dopamine. Social media gives us that little dopamine hit, but short-term dopamine is actually going to play more havoc with our hormones. So we want to be looking at those really balanced, healthy ways to keep those happy hormones high, especially in that second half of our cycle. Adrenaline and cortisol. Now, these are necessary for exercise. These are the hormones that we experience and get a boost of when we're in fight or flight. So, back in the day, that would be, we're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, but nowadays it might be that you've got an annoying email from your boss. So when you get those spikes of these stress hormones, they don't make us feel good, but we do need them, but it's all about balance. So exercise will give us a nice kind of sustainable increase in these hormones. It will also help us metabolize them in a healthy way. But if we do too much exercise, or we're generally doing too many things that make us feel stressed, then we are going to see elevated levels of these hormones, and that can play havoc with the rest of our hormonal balance. Insulin's a really interesting one. So insulin is connected to our blood sugar levels, and exercise will help us regulate our insulin production. And you might be thinking kind of what's that got to do with PMS? But actually, if our blood sugar levels are all over the place, then we're going to notice that they'll have a knock-on effect on things like estrogen. And we don't want that, obviously. We want to keep things pretty balanced. There's also other ways that we can regulate our insulin, like eating a really healthy protein-rich breakfast and things like that. But a really key one is exercise. And again, regular, sustainable exercise. And then estrogen and testosterone, so our sex hormones, I've kind of talked about estrogen a little bit in there. We do have testosterone. We obviously think of that as the male sex hormone, but we do have that as well in smaller doses, and that peaks and troughs throughout our cycle as well. And regular exercise is just going to help us keep those nice and balanced. Balance is a word I'm going to say again and again when it comes to this kind of thing. I think there is sometimes a misconception that PMDD is just all about that your hormones are out of balance, and it's not. It's more about having an oversensitivity. But if we can keep things balanced rather than peaking and troughing in a really extreme way, that's going to help us have less extreme feelings, emotions, and symptoms. Again, balance. Let's talk about the hormone triad. So this is something that Evelyn actually talk about in their exercise guide, which again, I would highly recommend downloading. It's super, super informative. And this is kind of talking about the three things that can really impact our hormonal health. So exercise, nutrition, and rest. We need to be looking at all these three things equally, because if we are focusing on one but not focusing on another, we're not going to feel the benefit. So for example, you could listen to this webinar today and go, right, yeah, that's great, thanks Connie, I'm going to go and start exercising 5 times a week, but then I'm going to come home and I'm going to sit up on my phone scrolling until midnight, and then I'm going to have a really rubbish night's sleep and not get that rest, and I'm going to then wake up feeling crap and reach for some ultra processed foods for breakfast rather than getting a healthy, nutritious, protein rich breakfast. Then doing all the exercise with all the will in the world isn't going to have a massive effect. We need to be looking at these three factors together, and we need to be looking at having a balanced lifestyle that includes all three. That's also really important when we talk about over exercising. So you can have too much of a good thing. So exercising is wonderful, but if we are overdoing it, then we are going to see a big impact on our hormonal health. So as I mentioned earlier, cortisol is something we need for exercise. It's something that happens when we exercise, especially things like high impact exercise workouts. And we don't want to over exercise and have our cortisol levels at the ceiling where we're just like constantly buzzing with stress and we are overdoing it, because that's not going to help with any of the symptoms that we might experience when we're PMSing. You might also be familiar with the idea that overexercise can stop our period. So this is more common with elite athletes and, in elite sports, but it can happen if we kind of are overdoing it too much. And especially if we're going back to that hormone triad, we're not thinking about nutrition and rest as well. If our periods are stopping, again, I think many people just kind of go, oh, well, my periods aren't here anymore. And for some people, they actually are like, great, I haven't got a period. But if your period has stopped or has gone really irregular, that is a sign from your body that things are not well in your hormonal world. So that is definitely not something we want. We want to see that regular cycle, whatever that means for you, and your period coming every, 4 to 5 weeks or whatever that might be. Your period is a sign from your body that things are good in your hormones. And so if your period is stopping because you're exercising, you really want to take that seriously. And also just a note on kind of disordered body image when it comes to overexercise. I think that culturally, we really recognize now that if someone is not eating right, or they're being restrictive, or they're, making themselves sick, have an eating disorder, we really recognize that as connecting with body image. I think it's sometimes harder to spot when maybe issues around body image and self-worth translate into over exercise. I think we don't always recognize that in ourselves or in other people as a problem, but it is, I think exercise is something we should be doing because we want to be kind to ourselves. We want to love our body, not because we are punishing ourselves or we are just desperate to look a certain way. My dog has just started barking because someone has dared to pull outside our house. So I hope you can't hear that too much and it's not too distracting. She should calm down in a minute. So yeah, so that's over exercising. I think just wanted to flag that. I think especially when we are struggling with extreme PMS or PMDD, for me, definitely kind of body image stuff and self-love stuff can go really, south. And so if that's something that you are sensitive to or prone to, I really would just encourage you to make sure that your relationship with exercise is healthy and is about being nice to yourself rather than punishing yourself. So, training in your cycle. I think cycle syncing our workouts is something that when I started working in women's health, 7, 8 years ago, was not something many people knew about. It was quite novel. I think, a lot of people got quite excited, in apps and stuff now about how to kind of sync your cycle. And then more recently, there has been some studies or some kind of scientific pushback from professionals about, is this a myth or is it something we should be looking at? And I think, from my personal opinion, it's somewhere in the middle. I think it's undeniable that as we move through our cycle, our energy levels differ, our kind of performance will differ. And it's really healthy to be able to look at each phase of your cycle and recognize what could be going on for you at that time. In a minute, I'm going to go into the different phases and kind of different exercises that might be good and different things to consider. But I think that understanding your body is really, really powerful when it comes to finding the right exercise for you at different times. But I would say it's about recognizing what is going on for you. I think if you go on the internet and download something that's like, right, on day this of your cycle, you should be doing this, and on day that of your cycle, you should be doing this, it's not necessarily going to be right for you. What is actually more powerful is to track your cycle and start to recognize the patterns that are happening for you at different times of the month. You might see that, when you're PMSing, you have just got no energy to go and do anything other than get outside for a walk. And that is okay. For some people, they will be getting PBs on their periods. I've heard that numerous times with NIXI. People buy knickers because they've got a marathon coming up and then they wear them on their period and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I got a PB. So I think we don't want to be restricted by, oh, I'm in this phase of my cycle, so this is what I can do. It's about recognizing your own personal physical and emotional symptoms at each time and then syncing up your training to yourself. With that said, I obviously wanted to put together a bit of a guide on what could be going on in each phase and things that you should consider. Again, these are generalizations. You are going to know your body best. You are going to understand what is going on for you. So track your cycle, maybe think about these things that I'm talking about here and see where you kind of fit. So, menstruation phase, when we are bleeding, again, listen to your body. That is the most important thing in every single phase of your cycle. But I think especially when we are bleeding, your body is doing an amazing job. It's doing something really physical, even if you can't see it. So it's really important to take that rest if you need it, to lean into those kind of snuggly hibernation days if that is what you need. There is no point pushing yourself to an extreme when your body is already doing something pretty incredible. Pain is something that obviously a lot of people experience during their period. I will say, and I know that the Evelyn team would agree with me on this, extreme pain is common, but it's not normal. If you're experiencing extreme pain to a point where you literally cannot physically get out of bed, that is something you should talk to your doctor about. It could be a sign of endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, and many other health issues that can be connected to period pain. So listen to your body if it is painful. There is a massive difference between being like, I'm on my period, so I don't feel like going for that, whatever, 13-mile run today. I think I'll taper it back to a 10K. That's one thing. Saying I cannot leave my bed is another. So I think, again, listen to your body and think about what's going on there. If you are experiencing period pain and cramps or, lower back pain or wherever the pain might manifest for you, yoga is incredible. There are so many great yoga poses you can do to actually alleviate a lot of the cramping that you're having. Endorphins are a natural pain reliever. So when we move our body, even if it's just a little bit, it's going to naturally relieve pain. And if we are experiencing muscle tension to do with our period, then that stretching is going to be really good. So definitely leave more time for stretching if you are doing something more kind of aerobic in terms of exercise. And if you just can't manage anything else but a yin yoga class, those lovely long holds, that opening up of your pelvis is going to really, really help. When we talked about the hormone triad, we talked about nutrition. So again, I could do a whole other webinar on nutrition, so I won't go into too much detail about this today. But when we are bleeding, we are using lots of energy, as I said, even if we don't recognize it. And we are losing iron. Blood is, as we bleed, we literally lose iron. So that is something, if you do want energy, if you do want to fuel your body for exercise or just for feeling happier and healthier every day, you really want to think about fueling your iron levels. So lots of leafy greens, nuts, pulses, and things like that. So that is something I would definitely prioritize, whether it's just getting like a smoothie full of all these things and first thing in the morning. I think that's going to help replenish your iron stores, which is going to help you have a little bit more energy during your period. And again, kind of manage your expectations. I think I've already touched on this, but your performance, your motivation, if sport is something that you're really, trying to track or improve, or if there's goals that you're trying to reach, you might notice that it's a little bit harder to reach those during your period. It also might not. You will recognize what is going on for you. And I recently gave a talk to the National England netball team, and we talked about actually there are some studies that show things like reaction time is higher when we're on our period, and sort of we as an athlete you're thinking differently. So I don't think it's a case of going like, oh well, I'm on my period, so I'm going to be rubbish that day. That's not what's going on. But I think it's just about being a little bit kind to yourself. So our follicular phase. So, I mean, technically your follicular phase starts when your period starts. But I think for me personally, and I think a lot of people recognize that whilst you're feeling that kind of estrogen increase, it's not until you kind of stop bleeding that you really get that lovely kind of Beyonce vibe of feeling your best. I'm very grateful for the time this webinar, because I literally stopped my period yesterday. If I'd had to do this last week when I was PMSing, I would have really not been feeling my best. So I'm really grateful to be in my follicular phase right now. I'm feeling a bit more confident. And so I think that also can be applied to exercise. So this might be a time you want to push yourself a little bit more. It might be a time that you see that your performance increases and you can go, actually, yeah, I'm out on a run. I will do that extra kilometer or something like that. And I think confidence is something that I really think maybe, even if, I think maybe confidence is talked about in elite sports, but even if you just exercise for fun or for your health, I think confidence is really important. I find it really difficult when I'm in my luteal phase to, want to go and try a new class or go to an unfamiliar environment, or maybe do a team sport where, I'm going to have to be talking to loads of people that maybe I don't know. So I think your follicular phase is a really lovely time to do that. If there's a new sport you've been thinking of trying, or a new club that you're thinking of joining, if you can time it around your cycle and you want to do that, I think this is a really great time. You're going to feel more confident. You're going to feel more open to risk. And so I think it can be a really nice time to do that. Now, there are some downsides to the follicular phase when it comes to exercise. Again, research is quite limited, but there are indications that we are more prone to injury, especially in our kind of like late follicular phase as we move towards ovulation. This is thought to be because as our estrogen levels increase, there's also another hormone called relaxin that increases alongside it. Relaxin is something that I know a lot about, because it is something that you have a lot of during pregnancy. It relaxes your muscles and your ligaments so that your body can physically change to kind of prepare for pregnancy, or carry a pregnancy. So as our body gets towards ovulation, it's like, right, okay, we could be getting a baby in here. Let's start loosening up those muscles, but that can make us more prone to injury. So definitely, I think stretching and warming up is something that's really, really important wherever we are in our cycle. And certainly around this time, just be really conscious of that, because if you're feeling great and you want to push yourself and then suddenly you get injured because you've really gone for it, this could be why. So just be careful of that. And again, we can have too much of a good thing when it comes to estrogen. So estrogen makes us feel good. It's amazing. But there are studies that show that people that struggle with PMS, PMDD, endometriosis, who are having more extreme experiences in their luteal phase, can also have heightened levels of estrogen. So we love estrogen, we want it, but again, coming back to that idea of balance, we want to keep that balance. And what we eat can really help metabolize and detoxify our body from estrogen levels so that they don't get too high. So fermented foods can be really good for that. Healthy fats can be really good for that. But generally, just being aware of what we're putting in our bodies, because if we kind of are just eating loads of ultra processed foods and things like that, it's gonna mess around with those levels. So ovulation phase. So I think obviously ovulation phase is, it's more about that peak of our follicular phase, and as we transition into that, we do see again around this time, around our time of ovulation, we are feeling really confident. You're feeling a lot of the time you might be feeling a bit sexier, so you might feel much more confident to kind of go out there and just feel good in your body. So I think just enjoy that if that is your experience of ovulation. There is a kind of thought process, and I think this is also kind of true follicular phase, but around ovulation, our testosterone levels do peak. Again, we're women, so they're not going to be as high as for men, but we do see a peak in testosterone around this time, and it can be a really, really great time for strength training when we've got a little bit extra umph. So, if this is something that you like to do, you might be able to push yourself a little bit more during this time, or if it's something you never do but want to give a go, this could be a really nice time to get lifting some weights in the gym. And again, that doesn't have to be super, super heavy. It could be a body pump class or something like that. Now, ovulation is a time a lot of us feel good, but there's always a kind of a group of people who actually struggle with the pain of ovulation. They can, really feel that egg being released. They can suffer from things like bloating and stuff like that. So just be aware of that. That again, as with all pain, if it is extreme, would definitely recommend talking to your doctor about it. But just to be aware that if you aren't feeling your best at this time, that could be what's going on. And again, you might want to kind of revert to some of the things we talked about in the menstruation time, that if you're struggling with bloating, you're struggling with pain around ovulation, then again, those kind of hip opening yoga poses, those nice stretches, those gentle exercises like walking might be something you want to include at this time. And again, we are still prone to injury at this time. So always make sure you warm up and you stretch, especially, like I said, if you're kind of lifting weights for the first time or something like that. You don't want to suddenly injure yourself and knock yourself out for the rest of your cycle or the rest of the year if you have a horrible injury. So just be really, really careful. So luteal phase, this is obviously where I do want to focus a bit more time on, because this is when we are experiencing those PMS symptoms. They start creeping in, and for me personally, definitely just get more and more extreme right up until the point that my period comes. So this is where we'll just spend a little bit more time today talking about what we can do at this time of our cycle. Again, as I said at the start, we want to be looking at every single phase of the cycle. But if you are getting to luteal phase and you are in crisis, which I think anyone with PMDD can experience, it's really helpful to think about, right, well, how can I move my body at this time of my cycle that could hopefully help? So before we get into a few suggested exercises for the luteal phase, let's just look at a few things to consider. So keep cool. So it is small, but it is mighty that we have a body temperature shift as we ovulate, and that tends to stay up for a lot of our luteal phase. So you might notice that you are exerting yourself a bit more, you're more sweaty when you go to the gym, or you're just finding it hard to kind of get going, and it could be to do with your body temperature. So just be aware of that and think about it. I went to a hot Pilates class in my luteal phase the other week, and I was just like, this wasn't a bit of an error on my part. So just something to think about. Enjoying your comfort zone. I think that again, this is generalizations, and this isn't me saying you can never go and try new things in your luteal phase, but it's just recognizing that you might not love it. And I think something when it comes to exercise, especially in the times of our cycle when we might be lacking in motivation, don't put yourself in a situation where you're just going to go, do you know what, I just really don't want to do that, I'm just going to cancel that class. I don't know that instructor, I don't know how it's going to be, and then you can get in your own head and suddenly you just find yourself cancelling. I think that when you are in this phase and you really want to move your body, it is about finding something you enjoy, something you feel comfortable and confident doing. So don't necessarily feel like you need to push yourself to do something new if it doesn't feel right. As our estrogen is dipping after ovulation, so are our energy levels. So again, take it easy, be kind to yourself, listen to your body. Again, I can say this again, time and time again. If you don't feel like that, or actually you love running and you love long distance running, and even in your luteal phase you feel like you can do it, then obviously go for it. This is not a prescriptive thing of you can't do this, you can't do that. I think it's just about recognizing that, that this can be a tough time and we need to be kind to ourselves. And I think we need to give ourselves easy gateways to moving our bodies without feeling like, I'm going to fail, or I can't do this, or God, I didn't do a good job at that class, so I'm going to cancel tomorrow. Things like that. I think it's all about at this time being really, really kind to yourself. So before I get into a few suggested exercises, let's just talk about some of the symptoms that we experience with PMDD. And again, it's so complex. there are so many things going on. Everyone is individual, but let's just look at some of the top line things that might be going on. So from an emotional side, anxiety can be really, really high. Feeling blue and sad can be, and or in some cases depressed. This is when we can start to feel it if we are living with PMDD. Exercise naturally boosts endorphins and serotonin. So as our serotonin is getting low, and if we've got PMDD, we are really sensitive to that dip. Bringing that up with exercise is a fantastic way to help get those happy hormones higher. Low confidence. I think I completely know as soon as I've sort of gone to my luteal phase or I recognize, okay, where am I at my cycle? Okay, yeah, I'm PMSing. Is my confidence just hits the floor? And that can be to do with work. It can be to do with how I look. It can be to do with how I'm mothering, like whatever it is. I just notice that my confidence gets really, really low. And that can kind of be a barrier to get wanting to go and exercise. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that exercise in studies time and time again has shown that it can give us a confidence boost. I think that, yeah, the stat here, 71% of people, so that's a huge number, feel more positive about themselves after they've done exercise. And I think you can just imagine that anecdotally, if you go out and achieve something, even it might be that you go in and set yourself a goal to run a 5K and you do it, and it's like a big tick in your box of like, look what I've done today. It could also be, I got out the house today. I think it's just being able to psychologically set yourself a goal, no matter how big or small, and get out there and move. Not only are you going to feel the natural boost of confidence from those endorphins, you're also going to give yourself a sense of achievement, even if it's a small thing. And I think that's massive. It's really, really, don't underestimate that when you are feeling low at this time of the cycle. And mood swings, like I think again, when we are so sensitive to those hormonal shifts and our emotions, I definitely feel this can go up and down and left and right and everywhere. Exercise is brilliant because not only is it going to boost those happy hormones and make those highs feel better, it also gives you a chance to unleash the negative emotions. Like there is something about, like, I mean, God, if you're really feeling it and you go to a boxing class and you just let out all that rage and that anger that we can feel at this time of our cycle, or even just going for a run and sweating it out, it is such a healthy way to process emotions, to unleash negative energy. And then also, when you finish, you've let go of the negative and then you get a boost of the positive. So it's just incredible. And I know, again, anecdotally, last week when I was really struggling, there were 2 days that I cancelled classes because I just couldn't face it. And maybe that was right at the time. But I know that the day I did go to a class that afternoon, I didn't feel 100% better, but my God, I felt so much more in control. I felt so much more positive and I felt much more capable. So I definitely, I can see it personally, the impact. And then also, sorry, physical PMDD symptoms. So let's not forget about those. So, fatigue is a huge one. And again, these are kind of like, they're barriers, but also we have to kind of remind ourselves that I might not feel like going out for a walk and I just want to sit on the sofa all day, but actually it kind of sounds contradictory, but even if we have got low energy, exercising can actually help boost our energy as well as using it. So that increased heart rate is going to get oxygen pumping around your body. You're going to get the reduced sensitivity to the serotonin receptors, and that can help us feel more energized. So it's kind of a little bit sometimes like mind over matter, and that again, that's not me belittling the experience of people who are like, so tired that they can't do anything. But if you can just get moving a little bit, I promise you that your body will respond in a way that's actually going to make you feel more energized rather than less. Bloating, again, is something that I know is really, really common around this time, especially if we are struggling with PMDD. And again, we want to really be looking after our digestive system during this time. It's going to help with bloating or kind of any other gastrointestinal issues that might be going on around this time, like constipation or diarrhea. Obviously, what we eat around this time is really important for that, but exercise is also great for getting that digestion moving and grooving, and it's going to help reduce the risk of bloating. And then pain. Obviously, I've talked about this a little bit before. So those natural kind of pain relieving endorphins are going to help with any sort of pain that you're having. Stretching, is going to help with all the cramping, but even things like sore boobs or aches and pains or migraines. Again, I appreciate if you're in the midst of PMS migraine, the idea of going for a run is maybe just not something that sounds appealing. But if you can get out there and do something, those endorphins are going to help relieve some of the pain. So let's talk about some of the best exercises that you can do before or during your period. I think these are all really helpful for our menstruation phase as well, when again, we just might not be feeling our absolute physical best. So walking, you can put running alongside this as well, but I think obviously completely like depends what you like doing. If you can, the idea of running or the idea of running during your luteal phase is just makes you kind of feel dread, then don't do it. But that doesn't mean that you can't get out there. Get out into the fresh air. I mean, if it's just a walk around the block on like a horrible rainy day, that is better than nothing. But God, if you can get out in nature, that is going to be game changing for you. There's loads of studies on the impacts of kind of nature and mental health. I think one is sort of 70% of people say that once they're out in nature, that their mental health lifts. So if you can even spend half an hour getting out to, your local park, or if you've got some woods, or if you have an animal, you can take them for a walk. Just that kind of mindful walk through nature and just, leave your phone at home or put your phone in your pocket. Don't necessarily even listen to music. Just like be in nature and move your body. Your breathing is going to regulate. Like, you're going to feel calmer. Your nervous system is going to calm. And that is going to be so helpful if you're struggling with low mood, anxiety, and things like that around this time of your cycle. I think, and this will be a theme that comes up with a lot of these exercises that I'm talking about, is that walking can be done alone or in a group. And, depending on how you're feeling when you're kind of navigating that luteal and period phase, you might be like, do you know what I really need right now is time completely alone. Or you might think, do you know what? I want to go walking with a good friend where I can have a chat about what's going on with me. So you can kind of pick and choose. And also, there's no like pressure on a time limit of like how long you need to go for, or what time you need to be there. I think sometimes when you are, and again, speaking from personal experience, when you are in that luteal phase and it can feel quite overwhelming and everything can feel like a task that you've got to tick off, being like, I've got to be at this class at this time, can sometimes be a little bit like, oh, suffocating. So the beauty of walking and just getting out in nature is like literally you can just do it on your time frame. It can be as short as long as you're feeling up to, and you're completely in control of that. So at the very least, if you can't do anything else, get out in nature. Dancing. So this is something that again is underestimated when it comes to exercise. And dancing could be that you go into a dance class, it could be ballet, it could whatever. It could just be putting on your favorite music and just shaking it all out in your living room or in your kitchen. I think that, music has been shown time and time again. I know I was just saying don't listen to music when you're walking, and I think the sounds of nature can be really, really great for our mental health. But also there's nothing like a certain playlist that you'll know just boosts your serotonin. Like you can literally feel it rising, getting your heart rate going. And again, it can just be done anywhere. It can just be something that you do for yourself. You don't have to spend money. You don't have to leave the house. You don't have to involve anyone else if you don't want to. But music can shift our mood, and might underestimate just how much how many endorphins get boosted just by like a even 5 minute kind of shaking off all of the negative energy. So this is something that I love doing, and just doing it house and you can look like an idiot and it doesn't matter what you look like, I think is really, really powerful and something that I think we underestimate a lot. Now, this is something that I think walking, dancing, some of the other ones I'll talk about, there's been like actual scientific studies on the impact on these things for PMS. Spinning I put in because this is my go-to when I'm in this phase of my cycle, because you get that endorphin rush from the exercise. You get the endorphin rush from the music. I mean, nowadays, don't know about you guys, but if you've been to a spin class, it's basically like being in Ibiza with like no alcohol. It's just, I feel like the instructors all want to be DJs and they take their playlists very seriously. But what I love about spinning is you are in a dark room, you are like quite on your own. and you can just be in your own world, which when I'm in my luteal phase, when I'm PMSing, like I don't massively love to be in a situation where I have to like interact with other people, quite frankly, or I feel in a small class where I can feel a bit conscious of like, oh, I'm looking in the mirror, oh, I'm doing that wrong. Is that person notice I've done that wrong? Again, that's all probably not happening. It's kind of in my own head. But that's how I feel, and maybe some of you recognize those feelings as well. So the beauty of just going into a spin studio, it being pitch black apart from some disco lights, and just sweating it out, getting that heart rate elevated, getting those endorphins going, and then literally being able to like walk out without basically have like looked in a mirror, spoken to another person. I'm making myself sound like the most antisocial person ever here, but that's luteal phase, Connie, and maybe you feel the same. So spinning is my go-to. So if I give you any tips, that is my favorite thing to do when I'm in my luteal phase. And also you can take it at your own pace. I think some, again, find a class that works for you. Some spin studios, have those things on the wall where it's like showing how far you're going, but also everyone's only looking at their own. So you can just do whatever you want. If there's a track where you're like, do you know what, I'm feeling really tired, I'm just going to sit here and like have a nice little cycle to the music and turn my resistance down, you can do that. You can just really tailor the exercise to where you're at. But I just think there's something about being in that room, moving your body and feeling that beat of that music just makes you feel so much better. So yoga, again, I feel like, oh, that's cut off a little bit there. Um, I feel like I've, already talked about yoga over and over and over again. But yeah, definitely during this time, like I said, the poses for reduced pain. I know if you Google online, you'll be able to find loads of different yoga moves. I think yin yoga is a brilliant one to do at this time. It's really, really grounding. I think especially from a mental health perspective and a nervous system perspective, when you're in that kind of extreme PMS, PMDD mode, and life can just feel so heavy and so hectic, and your mind can be full of like negative thoughts, and you can kind of start spiraling. Just taking some time to lie there, hold a pose, focus on your breathing is going to be incredible for your nervous system. It's going to lower that cortisol. Things like spinning, for example, they will boost your endorphins. They're also going to boost your cortisol. And, that's okay, but it's just something we need to be aware of. Yoga, that's slowing down, those low impact exercises, even like Pilates and stuff like that, they are going to lower that cortisol. And that's going to really, really help if you're struggling with things like anxiety. And then swimming. So you might think that, especially if you're due on your period or you're on your period, that you don't want to go swimming, but actually there's no reason why you shouldn't. And NIXI does have a bikini if that's something you're interested in. I can talk about that in a minute. But studies have shown that swimming decreases the intensity of our PMS symptoms. It's also just like, again, something else you can do on your own or with friends. It's really kind to aching bodies. Like if you are feeling that like bloat, that heaviness, those sore aching muscles, and the idea of like pounding the pavement on a run just is not doing it for you. Swimming is so great, right? You feel buoyant, you feel light. It's really, really kind on your muscles, and it's going to give you that endorphin rush without kind of exerting yourself too much from like a physical like impact perspective. I think also, cold water therapy, right? I mentioned earlier, you feel hotter in that second half of your cycle. So the idea of going to a sweaty class might not do it for you. Getting in water, like moving our bodies, feeling cool, and kind of, and again, I'm not Wim Hof, but I love cold water therapy. I live in Brighton, I live by the sea, so I can get in the sea sometimes. And there's, again, studies have been shown like the impact on our mental health from that cold water immersion therapy. So you can go to a pool or the sea and just swim even for 5 minutes, you're going to feel an almost instant serotonin and endorphin boost that can help you feel great for the rest of the day. Again, even if you don't want to swim, if you're into like saunas and immersing yourself in like the cold water buckets, again, that gives a dopamine hit. And I didn't plan to talk about this, so forgive me, I can't remember the exact stat, but it's basically like the dopamine hit that you get from doing that lasts for hours and hours and hours, rather than the dopamine hit you get from alcohol or drugs or social media is like a short kind of sharp thing that's going to spike us. So again, anything that releases hormones and kind of drags out and makes something more sustainable is great. So getting in cold water is incredible. So again, we talked a little bit about this throughout the talk, so I won't kind of focus on the negative too much, but I think I just wanted to recognize that there are lots of barriers for us when we are, especially when we're in that luteal phase, when we're in the midst of that kind of emotional negative spiral that we can be at this time. There can be all these kind of reasons not to exercise that come up in our brain. And I think part of it is recognizing those and learning how to kind of like almost like manage those objections internally. And hopefully, some of the things that I've talked about today can help with that. If you're there and you're lying there and you're like, oh, I can't go and do that, I've got no energy, I feel rubbish. Maybe you can just pop into your head, like, do you know what? I don't feel like doing it right now, but afterwards, I know I'm going to feel great. I know my confidence is going to be better. I know I'm going to actually feel less tired. And if you can have that inner monologue with yourself to kind of overcome some of those barriers, then I think that can be really, really helpful. Likewise with body image, I understand that sometimes, like I said, I went out to this hot Pilates class the other day, like everyone else there was like a proper Pilates princess in there, like matching Lululemon crop tops. And I just was feeling a little bit like, oh my God, I feel crap compared to these girls. And I was comparing myself, but I pushed through. I pushed through and I did it anyway. And I was really, really sweaty and I looked a mess, but I did, once I left that class, I did feel good for the rest of the day. Again, I'm not belittling these issues, like they are so real, and it's sometimes not easy to overcome them. But again, can't emphasize enough that whatever kind of self-hate that you are feeling towards yourself, that is going to be improved if you just get out there and move your body. Pain, I think I've talked about at length. Again, it can be really hard to get going when you're struggling with pain, but again, exercise is going to help. So, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to show here is that all of these barriers, exercise will actually help reverse them. So it's about just trying your best to do, like I said, even if it's just a walk, just trying to overcome those barriers personally. Oh, I'm going to talk a little bit about NIXI now before we go into questions. So, because I think the other barrier can be fear of leaks. So if you're due on your period and you're just like, oh my God, well, not only do I feel rubbish, but I could come on my period at any moment. I just don't want to do this. That can be a huge thing. And obviously, this is at NIXI something we're really, really, really passionate about. I think when it comes to having period care you can trust, that's obviously like you want to know that you're not going to leak. That's the main thing, because that's going to give you the confidence to move kind of in that when you're during your period or when you're on your period. But I would really encourage you, especially if you are someone living with PMDD, to take a good hard look at the period care that you are using. So traditional period care products are, a lot of them are full of toxins. They're all full of plastic. And these toxins, again, can play hormonal havoc in our bodies. And if we have PMDD and we're more sensitive to those hormonal changes, that is not going to be good for us. I think like the amount of microplastics in a traditional pack of tampons and pads is shocking. And, we're putting these things into our bodies. Your vagina, if you're talking about tampons, is literally, apart from your mouth, the most absorbent part of your body. So you wouldn't put something that was soaked in like lead and arsenic and plastic, microplastics into your mouth. So why would you put it into your vagina? So I think just really, really be careful with the period care that you're using. That doesn't mean you have to use period underwear. Obviously that is not it's not always the right thing for everyone. And at NIXI, we're really, really passionate about choice. But I would definitely encourage you to look at, other reusable things like menstrual cups, or if you do want to use tampons and pads, look for organic. We are really, really good friends with the girls over at Grace and Green, and their products are incredible. But if you do want to try period underwear, then obviously NIXI, we have been created with sport in mind. So our award-winning design has been created. So basically they're completely invisible under gym leggings. So you don't have to, again, if you're struggling with body confidence and feeling rubbish about yourself, then the last thing you want to be worried about is, oh my God, is my tampon string going to be hanging out if I wear shorts to the gym? Or, am I going to have a big bulky pad up my bum that everyone can see? So I think this is one of the reasons that so many people love our underwear. You can just put them on, even if you're due on your period, you can write, okay, I'm going to put my knickers on. I'm going to go and do my workout class. If I come on my period, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to have any anxiety about it. I'm going to have to leave the class to go and find a tampon, or I'm going to leak through my gym leggings. You can just wear the knickers, and it's just one less thing for you to worry about, which I think in our luteal phase, this is really, really what we need. We just need to make moving our bodies as easy and as stress-free as possible. So our knickers have been created with this scallop edge. They're invisible under gym leggings. They are extremely comfortable. They feel like a second skin. And that's why they're loved by kind of elite athletes, but also just women that want to stay active. And this is a little bit more about how they work. I'm very happy to answer questions about this, or you can drop me a DM after. But if you've never tried period underwear before, they essentially pull any liquid away from your body. They lock it in a kind of microfiber, which almost looks like it's like a sort of like a dishcloth, a microfiber dishcloth thing. Which, if you imagine, if you spilt something and put it on, it would suck everything in. So it locks it all in, and then the leak-proof layer at the bottom locks in the moisture, so nothing's going to get out. So they are really great for your body. They are really great for the environment, and they are created, our knickers are created specifically with exercise in mind. And you can get 20% off your next NIXI order with the code Evelyn. That is live now until the end of the month. And you can also sign up to our emails where you can get other sales. We don't do them very often, but obviously it is Black Friday coming. But I would definitely encourage you to use this one because we don't have a discount code on like this now. So if you want to give them a try, and again, we have loads of styles, we have different absorbencies, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And also, obviously, thank you so much, Evelyn, for having me. And as a thank you for you to watching this webinar, they are offering 20% off your next Evelyn subscription order with this code event20. So you can check them out there as well. So I'm conscious of time. I've spoken for a lot longer than I thought, but I hope that was helpful in terms of just trying to understand how, exercise can help with what you're experiencing if you're having that extreme PMS or PMDD. Do we have any questions, Imogen, before we sign off?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Connie. That was amazing. I actually have a question myself. So, when you're in your luteal phase and you don't want to do anything, and you know that exercising is the best thing that you can do, but you physically have no motivation to do that, you just don't want to even leave the sofa, what kind of like mindset shift could you do in that situation to help you, actually do what you know
Yeah,
is going to work for you?
I think sometimes it's like for me, I think sometimes it starts with like not even being like exercise is the thing that we're going to do here. I think it's like what is like a baby step we can do to shift our mindset from like I think again maybe this is what like I definitely get into this place where you find yourself and you're like oh, can't bother today, and then before you know it you're like on the sofa doom scrolling on your phone, like you're eating like loads of sugary snacks because you've got all those cravings, and you're just kind of like if you just took a snapshot you're like hang on, I'm not looking after myself right now. And so going from that to like I'm going to a gym class, like that step can just feel just too big. Like it just can feel too big. So I think sometimes it's just like, okay, well, what can I do right now in my environment to kind of start looking after myself a bit better? So like, is that okay? I'm not going to go for, I can't think about going to exercise right now, but I'm going to like, it sounds silly, but like clean the house, or like I'm going to go for a shower. Like I'm going to, I tell you what I have, which honestly I think is a really good investment is, I have like it's called like a bed of nails, like mat. So it's like a yoga mat with like these little, like, it sounds like horrible, but like little like pins on them and they're kind of acupressure. And like sometimes I'm like, okay, rather than just sitting like watching TV whilst I was looking at my phone, I'm gonna lie on the floor. So I'm literally all I'm doing is lying down, but I've like put on some nice like yoga music and I've laid down and the acupressure points are doing their thing. And it's like that shift of getting yourself out of almost like the bed rot phase can sometimes just be enough to kind of just shift your mindset a little bit without you having to leave the house or do anything. It's just kind of like, oh, that felt good to look after myself that little bit more. And then I feel like you're almost like one step closer to like getting out there for that run or going to that class. Like I think I think especially when you're in that sort of PMDD, PMS mode where like everything can feel really overwhelming. Like you've got to make yourself like a little roadmap to like getting better. And I think that, yeah, it would be great if we were all like, right, I feel rubbish. I'm going to go and walk out, go for an hour's walk. But I just know that that's not possible. But I think also like getting out of the house is really, really key. And even if that is literally like, I'm going to walk to the corner shop. Like it's just like getting out and like a slight shift. I think we just can, it's just so easy. And don't get me wrong, like sometimes you also need that. Like sometimes you do need to like snug up on the sofa and watch a good movie. But I think we all know in our heart of hearts when it's being destructive behavior rather than helpful. And I think those tiny little shifts, like having a shower, clean the house, doing something, listening to like meditation or something, it just, I think, shifts you out of that mode. And then you start to feel like, actually, I want to do more for myself to feel better.
Yeah, so it's like baby steps.
Baby steps, totally. Yeah.
Thank you. So we've had a question. Someone's asked, you've mentioned about the cycles. How do you actually track your cycle?
That is such a good question. And I don't know whether I could definitely talk about it as well, but I don't know if you guys have done a webinar on this before, or you definitely have got guides and stuff on it, haven't you? So I think that so there are loads of apps out there to track your cycle. I would say choose your app wisely, like do your research because there have been like quite some scary reports, especially in the US, of like data being sold, which obviously we don't want like Mark Zuckerberg knowing when our period is due or whatever, so they can target our ads and stuff like that. So I think tracking apps are really, really great, but do your research. I don't know if there's one that you guys recommend. Like I think Moody app is pretty good. But there's a few out there, and I would just
Mm.
definitely like do your research. So how that works, like obviously you just like are tracking, and you also, I will say, you don't need an app to do this. It's obviously just apps make our life easier, but you can do this by like journaling. And actually, I think journaling can be like a really nice self-care activity as well. So like don't dismiss that. If you like putting pen to paper, that can be good. But essentially what you want to be doing is, right, I've started my period on this day. This is day one, and then just kind of tracking like what is going on for you each day. So like obviously during your period you might want to be like how heavy your bleed is, like what symptoms you're experiencing, yeah, all those kinds of things. So almost like how you're feeling, how your body is feeling, how your mind is feeling, and then you basically like track that kind of throughout your cycle until your next period comes. And as you start to do that kind of month on month, you'll start to notice patterns. So you'll start to be like, oh, okay, around day 16, suddenly I felt really underconfident at work, or I felt like I had no motivation to exercise. And you'll start to kind of recognize. You can also, as well, if you want to kind of take it a step further, and this is something that I did when I was trying to get pregnant, which again, cycle tracking can be really helpful for that. It can also be helpful for trying not to get pregnant. But if you want to know where you're when you're ovulating, then the other thing you need to be doing is checking your basal body temperature, because literally as we ovulate, our body temperature starts to rise. So again, if you want to really kind of get to know your cycle, people kind of think, oh, I just ovulate in the middle of your cycle, but you don't always. So I think tracking your ovulation as well as your period can be really, really helpful. But yeah, I think find an app if you prefer apps, find the one you trust. If you like pen to paper, then definitely just start journaling and just track how you're feeling each day. It's kind of as simple as that, like what's going on for you physically. And I would say you want to do that for like at least 2 to 3 months. And once you do, you'll start to see patterns and also write down what you've been doing because you might notice, sorry, months where you had really extreme PMS, then you might look back and be like, oh yeah, well in my follicular phase, I just went up low, I went out loads, had loads of late nights, I was drinking loads, whatever. And then you're like, oh wow, my PMS is really bad. And then you might see a month where you're like, oh my God, my period came, I didn't even realize. What did I do that month? Oh, like actually, that's where I was doing yoga 3 times a week and like I was doing whatever. So I think tracking what you are doing and then how you're feeling, and then you can start to notice those patterns. And that can be really, really helpful for like planning your exercise and your social life. Like that's really, really good as well because you'll be like, oh, I actually don't want to go out and see people in my luteal phase, so I'm just gonna like keep it chill that week.
Perfect. Thank you. We have time for one more question. So someone's asked, how can we start normalizing talking about our cycle with our PT if you have a PT?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I think that if you if you have a female PT, I think more and more female PTs, well, and male PTs as well, but I think more and more female PTs are just like they are like clocking on to like that this is really, really powerful. They can really help their clients achieve better outcomes and like achieve their goals and stuff like that. So I think that hopefully if you have a PT that is already, on this, then you should definitely be coming to them. And again, like cycle tracking can help because you can really kind of show them what's going on. I think if you have a PT who just is uncomfortable, whether they're a man or a woman, and they are uncomfortable about this, I mean, they shouldn't be. And I think that it can be quite daunting to be the person to normalize that. But like you said, it should be normalized. So again, I think that I'm kind of thinking about men here, but obviously it could be women as well. I think like sometimes people get a little bit uncomfortable and you're like, right, I'm going to talk to you about my period and like this is what's going on in my period. And they're a bit like, oh God, I've never talked about this before. But PTs, anyone that works in health and fitness, they are obsessed with data. Like look how much people are spending on like Garmin and like tracking everything on Strava, whatever. So if you can go to your PT and you can be like, hey, look, I've been tracking my cycle and like, look, this is what's going on and this is where I've noticed that I feel this. And talk about that. I feel like that is something that people, and again, I feel like you shouldn't have to do that. You should just be able to be like, hey, I'm bleeding today. I don't want to do this. But if you are struggling with that conversation, I think coming back to the data, like making it more, which, menstrual health is health. It's not just about our period. So making it about your data and showing them what's going on, I think actually even the person that finds periods the most awkward thing in the world would find that really quite interesting and quite cool to kind of like get into the data. So again, I think coming back to that tracking and use that data as an entry point. There's also some really good podcasts recently, like kind of outside of like our world, like Diary of a CEO, like Stephen Bartlett, like he just did a whole series on like women's health and hormones and stuff. So even like sending stuff like that to someone that might be a bit like, oh, like it's not my, I'm not a woman, I don't have a period, I don't want to talk about this, it's embarrassing. It's like, hey, like literally the biggest male podcast in the world are talking about this, so you should be talking about it too. So maybe just finding things like that and sending that to them can be like a gateway to that conversation. And I think nowadays, even though some people might find it a little bit awkward at first, I think a lot of people will be way more receptive than you might think. And actually, once you have the conversation, once it becomes normalized, and then you can just talk about it as along with anything else you would in terms of your health, like what you're eating or your injuries, because that's how it should be. We should be able to talk about menstrual health in that way.
100%. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for jumping on and presenting the webinar. It's been so interesting. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And I hope you feel like you have learned something from this, you feel supported, informed, and ready to move with your cycle.
Thanks so much, everyone. And yeah, I mean, if there are any questions that you have in terms of follow up, like you're more than welcome to find us over on at NIXI Body on all our social media channels. You can scan this QR code that'll take you to our website. And, we are a small team. I'm involved in everything. So if you drop me a note on Instagram or on our website, I will see it. So if you've got any more questions, either about the knickers or about anything we just talked about, then I'm all ears. And definitely download the Evelyn guide. It is such a great comprehensive guide. Thank you so much for having me. I really hope that it helped someone. And yeah, thank you so much.